How is everyone doing? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. So today we're going to be taking a look at the debanking executive order. So President Trump just signed this executive order on debanking. The question is, what does it really mean for banks? And this was something I wanted to delve into because I do think it is going to matter to some banks out there. Not many, but I think there's a few out there that will find this interesting. So I came across this article in Bank Director, which is basically titled "The Debanking Executive Order is Here. Banks should prepare to address increased federal scrutiny around decisions to terminate relationships with cryptocurrency and conservative-leaning clients." So now this article does a couple of things. First of all, it kind of lays out, well, what is the executive order? What is the legal basis for the order, or the legality, if you will? And then it goes into, how should banks prepare for this regulatory scrutiny? And they offer 5 things that banks should basically do to prepare for the scrutiny. So let's run through this real quick. So on August 7th, 2025, President Donald Trump signed an executive order aimed at preventing debanking. Specifically, the order limits politicized or unlawful debanking, meaning it aims to prevent customers from being denied access to financial services because of their protected beliefs, business affiliations, or political views. It requires that banking decisions be made based on individualized, objective, and risk-based analyses. So the order identifies 4 specific ways that the federal government will limit politicized or unlawful debanking. So number 1, federal banking regulators must conduct a review to identify financial institutions that have engaged in or are currently engaging in debanking and punishing unlawful acts. Number 2, federal banking regulators must amend existing regulations and guidance to eliminate consideration of a potential customer's reputational risk. We'll come back to that one in a minute. Number 3, the Small Business Administration must require financial institutions that make SBA guaranteed loans to reinstate any customers subjected to politicized or unlawful debanking. Now, that's interesting because how do you reinstate someone after they have already paid their loan off and left the bank? That's kind of an interesting one. Number 4, the Treasury Department must develop a comprehensive strategies to stop politicized or unlawful debanking. So there's your 4 specific ways that the federal government will limit the politicized or unlawful debanking. Now, what is the legal basis for the order? Well, the order's legal foundation is a tenuous one, relying on several laws, none of which specifically address discrimination on the basis of political views or business activities. Still, banks that seek to end or have previously ended relationships with clients in the cryptocurrency industry or clients with conservative-leaning beliefs will need to be vigilant. That remains true even if the relationship was terminated for apolitical reasons, such as Bank Secrecy Act or anti-money laundering, BSA, AML concerns. Now, that being said, how should banks prepare for the regulatory scrutiny? So despite the order's questionable legal authority, banks should be prepared to interface with their federal regulators regarding perceived debanking actions that may have occurred in the past, and should develop strategies to assure regulators that unlawful or politicized debanking will not occur in the future. So what are these 5 things that they recommend? And I'll lay these out and then we'll go through each one. So number 1, take a close look at your past relationship with crypto clients. Number 2, review your banking relationships with clients connected to conservative or religious causes. Number 3, make sure current customer due diligence policies and procedures rely on individualized risks and not on generalizations. Number 4, be careful about utilizing reputational risk when evaluating potential customers. And then number 5, keep a paper trail demonstrating ongoing compliance with the order. So let's break them all down now in detail. So number 1, take a close look at your past relationships with crypto clients. So during the Biden administration, most of the banking industry retreated from crypto due to perceived risks common to the industry and increasing federal regulatory pressure. The Trump administration, however, has made developing the cryptocurrency industry a priority. Banks should prepare for potential regulatory scrutiny about alleged debanking of crypto clients and consider how policies and procedures could be revised to address potential concerns by regulators that risk assessments for digital asset clients are conducted on an individual basis. Now, I don't really think that banks have too much to worry about here, because the reality is There's an insane amount of fraud in the crypto space. There's an insane amount of unscrupulous actors in the digital asset space, as it were, and it was a huge issue with BSA and anti-money laundering, and that was why most banks just completely stayed away from crypto. And I think the federal government or regulators, I think anybody would make a very hard, I think it would be very, very difficult for them to make a case around crypto or digital assets, trying to say that, oh, well, you debank this person, or you wouldn't work with them because of their their use of crypto, or however money was coming in and out of the account. Because I think that any bank out there, if they kick somebody out because they didn't like the money that was flowing into their account and realized that it was coming from crypto, again, I think you can make that case that, hey, you're just following BSA and AML. And there were probably things that came up. You probably filed some suspicious activity reports, currency transaction reports, things like that. So that there was probably legitimate reasons there. So I think they would have a much harder time with number one. And if a bank was just doing what they're supposed to be doing, then I don't think there's any issue there. Now, number two, I think this is the big one. Federal regulators have been instructed to investigate potential past debanking actions that may have been motivated by religious or political discrimination. Banks that ended client relationships with conservative-leaning clients should be proactive in preparing to respond to inquiries from federal banking regulators, even if the bank's decision to end the account had nothing to do with the client's political leanings. This is the one that I think is the most obvious. And I will say this: did banks out there, did they cancel or did they debank certain conservative clients? Yes, they absolutely did. And they know that they did. They know that they did. There's no question about it. Here's where it gets gray. Here's where it gets hazy. And this is where I'm going to go back to the whole reputational risk thing. Now, one of the factors that regulators were using during the Biden administration to judge a bank was based on reputational risk. And they gave banks a cover, if you will, to basically, because basically what it was is, and I'm just going to say it plain, the Biden administration wanted to debank certain individuals, and the banks basically came back and, I'm sure the conversation went something like, hey, we can't just arbitrarily kick people out of the bank. That's not going to work. And then they said, oh, well, we'll how about this? How about we subject you to reputational risk? And if these people, or if we're going to ding you on a reputational risk because of these people, then you're now free to kick them out. And this gives you total cover. It goes back to what happened to a lot of gun stores and everything during Operation Choke Point. During the during the Obama administration, it was the same exact thing. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to label any basic gun retailer as high risk, and we're going to put them. And this was Operation Choke Point. So every bank had to label a gun store as high risk, and therefore didn't want to deal with them, and basically said, hey, you're now causing us regulatory scrutiny and regulatory issues. So you got to go. So that was the Obama administration's way of basically debanking gun stores around the country. And I think this is just the same kind of political tactics. And so, but here's the thing, and this is, like I said, this is where it's gray. If a bank's being judged on reputational risk, and the regulators are telling them that this is how we are viewing you, reviewing you, and you're going to be judged based on this, and we're going to ding you over here, okay, because you are dealing with actors that we feel give you reputational risk. So the bank basically says, okay, well, we're just going to stop dealing with them, and therefore we'll eliminate any potential reputational risk, and therefore getting dinged in our regulatory reviews, and we're going to stay on the good side of regulators. So the question is, how do you make the case that is fully, just, okay, we were debanking somebody purely for conservative or religious beliefs, whatever, what have you. Again, it gets very gray, and it gets, I think it's a difficult case to prove. Where I do think banks need to watch out for is in the most obvious cases. Like I would say, I'm going to use Mike Lindell, the my pillow guy. Mike Lindell was with a bank in Minnesota that he had been with for, I think, a long time. I think 20 or more years. And they just kicked him out. And it was obvious. It was painfully obvious that they kicked him out just because of his conservative and religious beliefs. And I would say that, Mike has a pretty strong case against that bank because of how high profile he was. Everybody understood who he was. Everybody understood where he was coming from, what affiliation he was politically and everything. So it became painfully obvious. I think President Trump is another one. I think President Trump has probably a good case if he wants to make it against some of the larger banks that he was dealing with. I think those are the type of cases and those are the type of situations that people really need to be concerned with. Again, if you're a small business or again, you're just kind of, I don't know, Joe Schmo, Joe Bag of Donuts over here, and the bank, booted you because, that you were popping up on their reputational risk parameters for some reason. I think that's just going to be a very difficult case to make. So, that's just kind of my thoughts on it. So, but let's run through these last couple ones real quick. So, number 3. Federal regulators have been instructed to investigate ongoing bank activities to make sure banks are not engaging in politicized or unlawful debanking. Banks should be prepared to demonstrate a fair and unbiased customer onboarding process. The order does not create an absolute right for all customers to bank at any institution they desire, and banks should develop clear policies governing what may lead to rejection or exiting of a customer. Number 4, the order instructs federal regulators to remove references to reputational risk from supervisory guidance and other regulations. Although certain regulators, such as the Federal Reserve, have indicated that banks are free to continue to consider reputational risk in their own risk management practices, the use of reputational factors may raise regulatory scrutiny, especially if the use of reputational risk appears to be based in generalizations about particular industries or political groups. And then finally, number 5, given the supervisory scrutiny of banks' documentation of BSA/AML reviews, compliance teams may need to demonstrate that the bank's records clearly state the reasons justifying an account exit. Similarly, banks will need to carefully assess how they document decisions to exit customers going forward. So, yeah, and I would think a lot of banks are already doing number 5. I think number 4, we've already seen a lot of regulators, the Federal Reserve, of course. We're not going to go down that political rabbit hole, but yeah, we all know why the Federal Reserve is doing that. No surprise there. But then, number 3, as far as federal regulators have been instructed to investigate ongoing bank activities, I would hope that no bank out there is, if they were doing this, is continuing to do this. I would hope that a lot of banks have just backed off and have just gone back to, if they in fact ever deviated, but, basically just back to normal practices, if you will. So, but, I do believe that this is going to be an issue for several banks, not a ton of banks, but I think it's particularly some of the bigger banks. I think, if I'm, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, JP Morgan, I would probably get ready, because I would say you guys are probably in for a little bit of a review, if you will, for this kind of stuff. I think, but again, I think most banks out there really have nothing to worry about in regards to this. But like I said, I think this was something that probably was more aimed at the bigger players that did perhaps some of a few of the more egregious incidents of this. But like I said, really interesting topic. I wanted to bring this to everybody just so they could get, some kind of understanding as to this executive order and what's going on and what could potentially come down the road. So with that being said, I will wrap up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe, as that always helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I always love getting back to everybody. And as always, make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone has a great day out there, and I will see everyone again real soon.